They brought Asterin Hale to the death orchard before the feast bells stopped ringing. Her wrists were still wet with dishwater. Ash clung beneath her nails. A smear of plum sauce marked the sleeve of her gray kitchen dress where Lady Selva Morn's goblet had shattered across the royal table, and everyone had turned, not toward the noblewoman who dropped it, but toward the servant girl they already believed could spoil anything she touched. Cursed hands, they called them. Rot fingers. Kitchen omen. The names followed Asterin across the black courtyard, like thrown stones while the court gathered beneath the winter moon. No one came to the death orchard at night, unless punishment required witnesses. The trees beyond the iron gate stood bent and leafless, their bark dark as old blood, their branches heavy with black apples that gleamed as if polished by funeral oil. One apple could kill a wolf. 3 could poison a bloodline. And tonight, by command of the royal table, Asterin was to harvest a basketful with bare hands. The high moon priestess stood at the gate in white robes threaded with morning silver. Saevra Dusk was thin, ageless, and beautiful in the terrible way of a blade kept clean for too long. Her hair was braided beneath a crown of black orchard twigs, and the moonstone at her throat gave off a pale glow that made every face around her look guilty. Inside the stone, something dark and round turned slowly, like a seed refusing to die. "Asterin Hale," Saevra said, "oath-bound servant of the Blackthorn kitchens, you are accused of carrying death blight into the Alpha King's feast." Asterin kept her head bowed, but not low enough to look broken. "My hands prepared bread, salt, and broth," she said. "I never touched the wolf plum wine." A rustle moved through the nobles. Servants were not expected to answer with facts. Lady Selva Morn stepped forward in a gown of frost blue silk, her golden hair arranged like a crown that had not yet been granted to her. She was the court's favored Luna candidate, promised by rumor if not by oath, soft-voiced when watched, sharp-eyed when crossed. Asterin had served her enough meals to know the difference. "The goblet blackened when she passed behind me," Selva said. Half the court saw it. Half the court had seen wine spill. The other half had seen what they wanted. Asterin looked at the goblet displayed on a silver tray. Its rim had indeed turned black, but not with rot. The stain had the dull shine of orchard sap. She knew that sheen because she had scrubbed it from knives, cutting boards, and the boots of men who came back pale from this cursed grove. Someone had touched the goblet with death apple resin before the feast. Selva's white-gloved fingers rested too neatly at her waist, not trembling, not offended, waiting. Asterin opened her mouth to say what she knew. A shadow crossed the courtyard. Every wolf went silent. Alpha King, Riven Blackthorn, entered through the west arch with no announcement, because thunder did not need heralds. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in black armor, worked with silver wolf-bone patterns. A dark mantle of winter wolf fur hung from one shoulder. His hair was black, his face severe, and his eyes held the cold gold of a man who had learned not to let hunger show. The court bent around him. Even the death orchard seemed to lean closer. Asterin had seen him only from below stairs before, passing through smoke-hazed corridors, seated at the high table, standing alone at the balcony after moonrise with one hand pressed against his chest, as if listening for something that would not answer. They said his wolf was alive, but hollow. They said his mate bond had never awakened. They said no woman in the kingdom could make his heart change its rhythm. Now his gaze found Asterin. Not her dress, not her bowed head, her hands. A small, strange flicker crossed his face, gone almost before it existed. Saevra noticed it. Selva did too. "The old law is clear, Majesty," the priestess said. "A servant accused of death, blight may prove clean by harvesting the fruit that answers only to true rot. If the orchard rejects her, she dies by its branches. If it accepts her, she brings back one basket of black apples and remains bound to service." "And if the accusation is false?" Riven asked. The courtyard chilled. Saevra smiled faintly. "The orchard does not lie." Asterin felt the words move through her like a warning. No one had said the orchard was merciful. Riven looked at her again. "Did you poison my table?" "No, Majestu." Her answer came too quickly to be rehearsed. Too tired to be pretty. Too steady to be useful to those who wanted fear. Selva's mouth tightened. Riven studied Asterin for another breath, and for that one breath, Something dangerous happened. She felt seen. Not saved. Seen. That was worse. Hope was a crueler thing than contempt when it came from a throne. Then the king's face closed. "Open the gate," he said. The iron bars groaned apart. Asterin did not beg. That was the only dignity left to her, and she held it with both cursed hands as the guards pushed her into the death orchard. The air changed the moment she crossed the threshold. The court's whispers dulled behind her. The moonlight thinned. Every black tree seemed to breathe, slow and patient, as if it had been waiting longer than kingdoms knew how to count. The first branch lowered. A black apple hung before her face. Its skin reflected nothing. Not the moon, not the court, not Asterin's pale face or dark eyes. It drank light whole. Behind the gate, someone laughed softly. "Selvra." Asterin reached up. The orchard went still. The apple was cold when her fingers touched it. So cold pain shot through her palm, up her arm, into the hollow beneath her ribs, where fear had been living since childhood. She twisted the stem. It did not break. A root moved under the snow. Then another. The trees bent inward. The court's laughter died. Asterin tried again, gripping harder. Black sap slid over her fingers, and every wolf in the courtyard began to growl. Not at her. At the trees. The apple pulsed once. She almost dropped it. The black skin split beneath her thumb, not like fruit breaking, but like a wound opening from the inside. Silver light poured through the crack. The wrought dark surface peeled away in curling strips until the apple in her palm shone bright as moonlit metal. Then it beat. Once. Asterin froze. The sound was small, wet, and impossible. A heartbeat. Beyond the gate, Alpha King Riven Blackthorn staggered as if struck through the chest. His hand flew to his breastplate. The silver apple beat again. Riven gasped. The entire court turned toward him. Selvra's face went empty with shock. Saevra did not look shocked. She looked furious. Asterin stared at the glowing fruit in her palm, at the black trees bowing lower and lower around her, and heard a woman's voice whisper from beneath the frozen roots. At last, the third beat shook the orchard, and beneath the Alpha King's armor, something answered. The sound that came from Riven Blackthorn was not a cry. It was too low for that, too strangled, too much like a wolf biting down on its own pain before the pack could hear weakness in it. But every wolf heard. The beasts along the courtyard walls rose at once, hackles lifting, golden eyes fixed not on the death orchard, not on Asterin, but on their king. Riven stood beyond the iron gate, with one hand locked against his breastplate, his face gone pale beneath the hard lines of command. The silver apple beat again in Asterin's palm. Riven's fingers dug into his armor. Asterin felt the pulse in the fruit answer something under her own skin, not in her chest, but deep in her blood, where fear and memory had always slept too close together. The beat did not feel like magic. Magic was what priests named things after they had chained them. This felt older, root deep, buried, and alive. The black trees bent closer. Their branches did not touch her. They bowed. Behind the gate, the court began to murmur. "Take it from her," Lady Selvra said. Her voice was sharp now, no longer wrapped in silk. Saevra Dusk lifted one white hand. "No one enters while the orchard is listening." Asterin looked at the priestess through the iron bars. For the first time since the accusation, Saevra's calm had thinned enough to show what lived beneath it. Not surprise, not holy concern. Recognition. The moonstone at her throat glowed faintly, and inside it the dark seed turned faster. Riven saw it. His eyes moved from the silver apple to Saevra's pendant. A slow, dangerous understanding did not form yet, but the first edge of suspicion sharpened there. "What is that fruit?" he asked. Saevra bowed her head. "A death apple that has reacted to corrupted hands." Asterin almost laughed. The sound caught in her throat, brittle and bitter. "It is beating with your king's pain, and you still call my hands corrupt?" The courtyard went silent. Servants did not speak to priestesses that way. Oath-bound girls did not accuse anything above them. Selvra stepped toward the gate. "You hear her majesty? She has stood among cursed trees for less than a breath, and already speaks as if the orchard belongs to her." A branch lowered beside Asterin's cheek. The black bark split. A tiny silver blossom opened where no blossom should survive winter. The court saw, Selva stopped. Asterin did not move. She knew better than to trust gentleness from things that could kill. The Death Orchard had taken men stronger than her, wolves faster than her, priests older than her. If it was sparing her, it had a reason. Reasons were rarely kind. Riven came closer to the gate. Asterin Hale. Her name in his mouth struck differently than it should have. No one in the kitchens used her full name unless calling punishment down. From him, it sounded like he had found something written wrong and intended to read it carefully. "Bring me the fruit," he said. Saevra turned sharply. "Majesty, that would be unwise." "I did not ask what was wise. The orchard has chosen contact. Interference may wake older roots." Riven's gaze did not leave Asterin, then let them wake. Asterin saw the court's fear deepen. It was one thing for a cursed servant to be trapped among black trees. It was another for the Alpha King to speak as if the orchard might answer him, and he did not care what it cost. She took one step toward the gate. The roots beneath the snow tightened around her ankles. Not cruelly, possessively. Asterin froze. The apple beat again. This time, the sound carried an image with it. A woman kneeling under the same trees, her hands buried in frozen soil, blood on her white gown, black apples hanging above her like watching eyes, a silver ring torn from her finger. A wolf howling somewhere beyond the orchard wall, but every branch bending to smother the sound. Asterin gasped. The vision vanished. The roots released her. Riven had gone utterly still. "You saw something," he said. Asterin's fingers closed around the silver apple. "A woman." The orchard shivered. Saevra's face hardened. The Death Orchard stores the final fears of those buried near it. Servant minds often mistake echoes for truth. Asterin looked past her, toward the twisted rows of trees. She was not afraid of dying. What was she afraid of? Riven asked. Asterin should have lied. She should have said nothing. Silence was the first lesson of kitchen survival. Silence saved skin. Silence kept scraps on plates. Silence kept oath-bound girls from being dragged before courts that needed someone small enough to punish. But the silver apple beat in her hand, like a heart that had waited too long for courage. She was afraid no one would know where they put her. A wind moved through the orchard, though the air beyond the gate remained still. Every black apple turned slightly toward Asterin. Not the way fruit moved on branches. The way faces turned. Riven's jaw tightened. Who was she? Saevra answered before Asterin could. A dead trespasser, perhaps. The orchard grew over centuries of punishment. Not every bone beneath it deserves a name. The apple beat so hard, Asterin nearly dropped it. Riven flinched at the same instant. His eyes flashed wolf gold. For one breath, Asterin saw the beast in him rise close to the surface, not hollow, not dead, starved. Something in his wolf had been pacing behind locked bone for years, and the apple had found its cage. Selva saw it too. Jealousy sharpened her fear into strategy. "Majesty," she said softly, "that thing is hurting you." Riven did not look at her. Selva continued, careful and cruel. "If the fruit beats with your heart, then perhaps the kitchen girl has not merely carried death blight. Perhaps she has touched what no servant should touch." Asterin's stomach sank. There it was. The accusation changing shape to survive. First poisoner. Now thief. Saevra's eyes flickered toward Selva, not approving, not surprised, measuring usefulness. "The Luna candidate speaks wisely," the priestess said. "If the fruit has formed from royal pain, it must be contained at once." "Contained where?" Riven asked. "In the moon crypt below the orchard." The seed inside Saevra's pendant turned again. Asterin saw it. So did the branch nearest her. Its bark split wider, and black sap ran down like tears. The silver apple warmed in her palm. Another vision struck, sharper than the last. Saevra younger, standing in a pit beneath the orchard, lowering something red and pulsing into the soil. Not a fruit. Not a heart. A bond. Riven's bond. Asterin stumbled back. The trees caught her, not with branches around her throat, with roots rising behind her like a wall. Riven gripped the iron gate. "What did you see?" Saevra's voice cracked like a whip. "The trial is not complete." The gate lock blackened beneath her raised hand. The orchard bars slammed shut more tightly than before, sealing Asterin inside. Selva smiled again, but now it trembled at the edges. Saevra lifted her moonstone pendant, and the dark seed inside it stopped turning. Asterin Hale, she declared, you will harvest the full basket. If the orchard has truly accepted you, it will surrender its fruit. If it has not, it will keep what it has claimed. The black branches lowered around Asterin. Dozens of death apples hung within reach. The silver apple beat once, then pulled her hand toward the deepest row of trees. There, between two ancient trunks, the snow had begun to melt. Something beneath the roots was beating back. Riven's voice cut through the iron bars, low and furious. Do not go deeper. Asterin looked at him, at the king who had ordered the gate opened, at the man clutching his chest as if part of him were buried under the trees with the dead. Then the orchard whispered from the dark row ahead, bring him home. And every black apple in the death orchard began to bleed silver. Silver blood slid from the death apples in thin, shining threads. It did not fall to the snow. It climbed. Each drop stretched upward from the fruit, trembling toward Asterin's hand, as if the orchard were trying to write with its own wounds. The black branches crowded closer, but still did not touch her. They formed a crooked aisle into the deepest row, where the snow had melted in a dark circle, and the ground pulsed beneath exposed roots. Asterin held the silver apple against her chest. The beat inside it had slowed, not weakened, waiting. Beyond the iron gate, Alpha King Riven Blackthorn stood rigid with one hand locked around the bars. His knuckles had gone pale beneath his rings. Every time the apple beat, something answered beneath his armor, and every time it answered, anger sharpened his face as if pain were easier to bear than confusion. Open the gate, he ordered. No one moved. Saevra Dusk lowered her moonstone pendant. The dark seed inside it had gone still, round and black as an eye that refused to blink. Majesty, if you enter while the orchard is in trial, the old roots may read your blood as interference. Then they may learn to read fear as obedience. The guards reached for the lock. The gate screamed. Not from iron, from underneath. Roots burst through the frozen stones at the threshold, twisting around the bars from within the orchard. They wrapped the gate so tightly that rust flakes fell like black snow. The wolves along the wall snarled and lunged back. Asterin flinched. The trees did not want him inside, or something beneath them did not want him taken. Selva Morn drew closer to Riven, her frost-blue gown whispering across the snow. Majesty, the servant still holds the fruit. If it is tied to your pain, let the priestess remove it before it harms you further. Asterin saw the look Selva gave the silver apple. Not fear alone. Calculation. The same careful stillness she had worn with the stained goblet. Riven did not turn toward her. If the fruit harms me, I will decide that after I learn why it knows my heart. Saevra's mouth tightened. Asterin knew that expression. Cooks wore it when a secret ingredient had burned in the pan, and the whole room smelled the mistake. The orchard whispered again from the deep row. Bring him home. I cannot, Asterin whispered. The nearest branch lowered a black apple into her path. This one split before she touched it. Inside was not silver flesh, but a small image. A memory curled in the fruit like smoke trapped in glass. A woman in a green bridal cloak stood before the old court, tears frozen on her lashes while a man with a wolf fur collar turned his back on her. Rejected, someone declared. The word struck the woman's chest like an arrow. Then hands dragged her away before her wolf could answer. The apple rotted into ash. Another branch lowered. Another memory. A pregnant Luna kneeling with both hands over her belly while a council accused her of carrying enemy blood. Her mate stood silent. The moon priestess cut a strand of hair from her head and sealed it in black wax. By dawn, the woman was gone. The fruit collapsed. Asterin backed away, but roots rose behind her not to trap her, she realized, but to keep her from falling. The orchard was showing her graves. Not every grave, only the ones buried with a lie still breathing. Her stomach turned. These are not final fears, she called to Saevra through the gate. They are memories. Saevra's eyes cooled. The cursed often mistake the dead for allies. No. Asterin lifted the silver apple. The dead are not asking me to hide them. The courtyard stirred. Servants looked at one another. Some nobles looked away. Selva's face tightened with the faintest thread of alarm because a punished kitchen girl could be ignored, but a punished kitchen girl speaking with witnesses was harder to bury. Riven's gaze stayed fixed on Asterin. What do they want? The answer rose through the soles of her feet before she could make sense of it. Names. Not vengeance first. Not blood. Names. Asterin swallowed. They want to be known. The Death Orchard answered. Every black apple in the first row turned silver at its stem. Saevra's hand snapped to her pendant. The dark seed inside it spun once. The silver faded from half the fruit. Asterin saw it. So did Riven. The priestess was not only watching the orchard, she was holding something inside it down. Enough, Saevra said. The servant has produced unnatural fruit and false echoes. The trial continues. Harvest the basket. A guard threw a wicker basket through a narrow gap beneath the gate. It skidded across the snow and stopped at Asterin's feet. The insult was clear. Bring proof, little servant. Bring death with your bare hands. Asterin crouched and took the basket. Her fingers shook, though she hated that they did. Courage did not make the orchard less dark. It did not make the black apples less lethal. It only kept her from letting the court see her beg. She reached for the nearest fruit. The moment her hand closed around it, a thorn split from the branch and cut her palm. Blood touched black skin. The apple did not poison her. It bloomed. Silver veins spread across its surface, and a woman's name appeared beneath the skin in letters made of light. Marith Vale. Asterin knew the name. Everyone knew the shame of it, though servants heard history in scraps. Marith Vale had been a noble bride, rejected for madness 30 years ago. Her portraits had been removed from the North Gallery. Children whispered she had walked into the orchard and let the trees take her. The apple showed the truth. Marith had not walked. She had been carried. Asterin placed the apple in the basket. The entire courtyard heard a woman sob once from under the roots. Riven's face changed. Not softened. Wounded. Marith was my father's first betrothed, he said. Selva vind still beside him. Saevra's voice became very quiet. Old scandals do not concern the crown tonight. Riven turned toward her. Everything buried under my orchard concerns my crown. The black trees groaned. Asterin picked another apple. Then another. Each fruit cut her. Each drop of her blood turned black skin silver. Each apple gave a name the kingdom had turned into rumor, curse, madness, infertility, treason, or shame. Women who had been rejected, hidden, or carried away when their bonds threatened alliances. Some were noble, some were servants. Some were wolves in human skin, whose mates had denied them before court witness and lived honored afterward. The basket grew heavier. Asterin grew colder. Her palm was bleeding freely now, and silver light had begun to thread through the cuts. The orchard was not taking strength from her. It was taking silence. Then she reached for the last apple in the row. The branch recoiled. Not from her, from Saevra Cependant. The moonstone at the priestess's throat flared black. Every root in the orchard tightened. The ground in the deepest row split open with a sound like bone cracking beneath snow. From the dark earth rose a tree smaller than the others, leafless and white, its bark pale as exposed rib. It bore one apple. Not black, not silver, red. It pulsed with a living beat that made Riven stagger hard enough for the guards to catch him. Asterin could not breathe. The silver apple in her hand pulled toward the red one, as if both had once belonged to the same heart. Saevra's calm shattered. Do not touch that tree. The entire court heard the fear in her voice. Asterin looked from the priestess to Riven, then to the red apple beating beneath the white branches. For the first time, the Death Orchard did not whisper. It pleaded. Remember him. The red apple beat like something that should have been inside a living chest. Asterin stood before the white tree, one hand wrapped around the silver fruit, the other bleeding into the snow. Around her, the Death Orchard had bent so low, its black branches made a roof of thorns above her head. Not a cage. Not yet. More like a chapel built by things that remembered being buried. Beyond the iron gate, Riven Blackthorn gripped the bars hard enough to bend them. Every pulse from the red apple struck him through the armor. The court saw it now. There was no hiding the way the Alpha King's breath broke, no disguising the gold flare in his eyes, no pretending the fruit had answered only a servant girl's curse. Saevra Dusk stepped closer to the gate. Do not touch that fruit. Asterin looked at her. The priestess's voice had lost its calm. That frightened the court more than any scream would have. The moonstone at Saevra's throat glowed black at its center, and inside it the small dark seed turned slowly, pressing against the crystal as if it wanted to root through her skin. The nearest trees recoiled from it. Their branches twisted away, sap bleeding from cracks in their bark. Asterin understood then. The orchard did not obey Saevra. It feared what she carried. "What is in your pendant?" Riven asked. Saevra did not answer quickly enough. His eyes sharpened. "Priestess." "The root seed," she said at last. "The old heart of the death orchard. It keeps the trees sleeping." Asterin looked around at the bowed branches, the silver bleeding apples, the white tree rising from a grave no one had named. "This is not sleep," she said. Saevra's gaze cut to her. "You are an oath-bound servant standing in forbidden ground. Do not mistake the orchard's hunger for kindness." The word servant was meant to lower her head. It almost did. Then the red apple beat again, and beneath the frozen roots, a woman's voice whispered so softly, only Asterin seemed to hear it. "Not hunga. Witness." Asterin's wounded palm tightened. Lady Selvra Morn moved beside Riven, careful as a knife sliding from silk. "Majesty, she is already repeating the orchard's voice. This is how curses begin. First pity, then influence, then ruin." Asterin turned her eyes to Selvra. For the first time, she saw what fear had hidden from her at the gate. One white glove held slightly behind the folds of Selvra's frost blue gown. On the fingertip, beneath the lace, a smear of dull black resin stained the fabric. Death apple resin, the same shine that had blackened the goblet. Asterin's heart steadied. Selvra had placed the poison sign. Saevra had provided the law that would send the accused into the orchard. 2 women, 2 motives, 1 punishment. Asterin did not speak the accusation yet. She had learned in kitchens that truth thrown too early was only another plate for the powerful to break. She faced the white tree. The red apple lowered. Its stem bent toward her bleeding hand. Riven's voice cut through the iron bars. "Asterin, do not." She looked back at him. He had ordered the gate opened. He had allowed the trial to begin. Yet now he looked at the fruit as if it were a blade held over both of them. "Because it may kill me?" she asked. His jaw flexed. "Because it may be mine." The court fell silent. The words did not sound like claim. They sounded like fear. Asterin looked from the king's hand pressed to his chest to the red apple beating under the white branch. "If it is yours, why is it buried beneath women with scraped-away names?" Riven had no answer. That mattered. Asterin reached up. Saevra shouted in the old moon tongue. The root seed in her pendant flashed black. A thorn burst from the white branch and cut deep across Asterin's palm before she could pull away. Pain opened bright and hot. Her blood struck the red apple. The orchard showed her the truth. Riven, younger and crowned too soon, standing in a hall of snow-colored banners while his wolf paced beneath his skin, restless and searching. Beneath the death orchard, priests lowered a silver-red light into the ground, wrapped in black roots. Saevra stood above the pit, one hand on the root seed pendant. Beside her, Lord Morn watched in silence, his daughter Selvra half hidden behind his cloak. Saevra's voice in the memory was calm. "A king with no awakened mate can be guided. A king whose bond roots in the wrong bloodline will burn every treaty we have made." The silver-red light struggled like a living thing. Riven in the hall above pressed a hand to his chest and staggered, though no blade had touched him. The priests buried the light. The orchard swallowed it. The vision snapped. Asterin gasped back into the present with the red apple in her hand. The whole court heard its heartbeat. Riven bent forward as if that sound had found the empty place under his ribs and struck it awake. "What did you see?" he asked. Asterin looked at Saevra. The priestess's face had turned white with fury. Then Asterin looked at Selvra's hidden glow. Selvra slowly closed her stained fingers into her palm. Asterin understood why the goblet had been marked, why she had been sent here, why the court had needed a cursed kitchen girl small enough to blame. The orchard had not chosen her by accident. Someone had feared it might. "They buried something from you," Asterin said. Riven's voice roughened. "My heart?" The red apple beat once. The silver apple in her other hand answered. Asterin shook her head. "Not your heart." The white tree bowed until its pale branches nearly touched her shoulders. "Your mate bond." The wolves erupted. The iron gate split down the center under Riven's hands. Saevra lifted the root seed pendant and cried another command, but the orchard answered first. The black trees bent away from the Alpha King, opening a path through the snow straight to Asterin. Riven stepped into the death orchard. This time, the roots did not stop him. They led him deeper. The orchard opened for Riven, as if it had been waiting to decide whether it hated him. Black branches lifted from his path. Roots withdrew beneath the snow. The air around him darkened, then brightened, then shivered with the silver blood dripping from the apples overhead. He walked through the broken gate without guards, without priestly permission, without looking back at the court that had gone silent behind him. Asterin stood beneath the white tree with 2 beating fruits in her hands. The red apple pulsed toward him. The silver apple pulsed toward her. When Riven came within 10 steps, both fruits beat together. He stopped. So did she. For one breath, the death orchard sounded like a chest remembering how to live. Riven's eyes fixed on the red apple. "Give it to me." Asterin almost obeyed. Servants were trained into obedience long before they learned the names of their own hungers. But the roots tightened softly around her ankles, not trapping her, only warning. She held the fruit closer. "If I give it to you, will it heal you or kill you?" His jaw hardened. "That is not your burden." "No," she said quietly. "But it is in my hand." The answer unsettled him more than defiance would have. He looked at her then, truly looked, past ash-smudged sleeves and kitchen curses and all the small names the court had thrown at her. Asterin felt the weight of his attention and hated how much warmth it carried through the cold. Behind the gate, Saevra lifted her pendant. The root seed inside the moonstone turned black. The path behind Riven sealed at once. Branches slammed down, weaving together between him and the court. Wolves snarled beyond the living wall. Selvra's voice rose sharply, distant, but clear. "She has trapped him." Asterin closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. There it was. The accusation Selvra had been waiting to shape. Riven did not turn back. "I stepped in by my own will." "They will not hear that," Asterin said. "No. They will hear whatever frightens them most." It was the first thing he had said that sounded less like a king, and more like a man who had survived a court long enough to despise its hunger. The white tree creaked. The red apple pulled Asterin's hand toward the deeper rose. She resisted, and pain flared through her wounded palm. The silver apple warmed in her other hand, gentler, but just as insistent. "The orchard wants us to go deeper," she said. Riven's mouth tightened. "Do you trust it?" Asterin looked at the nameless stones half buried beneath the roots. "No. Then why follow?" "Because I trust Saevra less." A low sound almost escaped him. Not laughter. Something darker, approving despite itself. They moved together beneath the black branches. The orchard did not walk them straight. It curved their path between graves, making them pass each scraped stone, each silver-threaded apple, each root swollen around bones the kingdom had turned into rumor. Asterin felt the dead watching through the fruit. Not begging now. Measuring. Riven felt something too. His steps slowed near one grave, marked only by a broken ring pressed into frozen earth. He stared at it. "What is it?" Asterin asked. His voice came low. "My father told me that ring belonged to a woman who betrayed him." The silver apple in Asterin's hand beat once. A memory rose from the grave. Not full. Not enough to drown her. Just an image. A young woman removing the ring with shaking hands while the old king watched from a balcony, his face hidden. She was not betraying him. She was being dismissed before witnesses, rejected with no wolf allowed to answer. Asterin whispered. She did not leave willingly. Riven's face went still. "Do not soften the dead for me," he said. "I am not. Everyone does. They turn crimes into tragedies and tragedies into weather." Asterin looked up at him. "Then listen when the orchard says it was a crime." For a moment, he looked angry enough to punish her. Then the anger turned inward. They walked on. The deeper trees were older. Their bark held shapes that looked too much like fingers pressed from inside the wood. The black apples here did not bleed silver. They watched, dull and closed, as if waiting for a price. At the center of the deepest row, the snow had melted around a sunken circle of stones. The white tree's root ran beneath them, pale and thick, wrapped around something buried at the center. Each time the red apple beat, the ground answered. Asterin Hale. Riven's hand shot out, then stopped before touching her shoulder. She felt the almost touch. So did he. The space between them sharpened. "You are bleeding too much," he said. "I have bled in kitchens for less important reasons. That is not courage. No, it is practice." His eyes darkened. The silver apple opened in her hand. Not split, opened. Its skin unfolded like petals, revealing a seed of white light at the center. The moment Asterin's blood touched that seed, the ground beneath the circle of stones trembled. A woman's voice rose through the roots. "Blood remembers what law buries." Asterin went cold. Riven heard it too. His wolf flashed behind his eyes, close enough that the air between them tasted of winter fur and iron. "What are you?" he asked. Asterin wanted to say cursed. "Kitchen girl." "Nothing." But the orchard answered before she could. A root cut across her palm again, and where her blood struck the snow, a small white blossom grew. Then another, then a ring of them around the sunken stones. Saevra screamed from beyond the sealed branches, and the sound told Asterin more than any vision. The priestess had not feared the cursed girl. She had feared what the girl might grow. The stones at the center split apart. The buried root loosened. Beneath it, something silver-red pulsed in a nest of black thorns. Riven dropped to one knee, as if the sight had struck his bones. Asterin reached toward the buried light. The thorns opened. Inside them lay not a heart, but a mate bond woven into the shape of one still alive, still beating, and wrapped around a broken name written in root and blood. Asterin leaned closer. The name was not Riven's. It was hers. Riven saw the name before Asterin could hide it. The silver-red bond pulsed inside its nest of black thorns, alive and wounded, wrapped around root script that had grown through years of darkness. Asterin's name curved through it, not carved by knife, not written by human hand, but woven as if the bond itself had remembered her before she had ever stood in the orchard. Asterin pulled back. The thorns closed halfway, shielding the buried light. Riven remained on one knee, his face stripped of every royal mask. For the first time since she had seen him enter the courtyard, he looked less like a king than a man staring at the missing part of his own chest. "That is not possible," he said. Asterin's throat tightened. "I did not put it there." His eyes lifted to hers. She expected suspicion. She had lived beneath suspicion so long she knew its shape before it spoke. But Riven only looked at her wounded hands, the silver fruit, the white blossoms growing where her blood had fallen. "I know," he said. The words struck harder than doubt. Because she wanted to believe them. Because believing him would be dangerous. Beyond the woven wall of branches, Selvra's voice rang through the orchard. "Majesty, answer us." Saevra's voice followed, colder. "If he cannot answer, the servant has bound him." The court stirred outside, muffled by bark and snow. Wolves snarled. Men shouted. The living wall did not open. Asterin stood too quickly. "You must speak before they make that truth." Riven rose with effort. The buried bond beat, and pain crossed his face before he crushed it flat. "They have always made truth from what serves them. That does not mean you should let them." His gaze sharpened. There, she had gone too far. An oath-bound servant did not tell an alpha king what he should do. Not even in a cursed orchard. Not even holding the fruit of his stolen bond. But Riven did not rebuke her. Instead, he looked toward the sealed branches as Selvra's voice rose again, sweet enough to poison. The girl held the fruit. The girl bled into the tree. Now the king is silent. What more must we see? Asterin's stomach turned. Selvra was fast. She had changed the accusation again before anyone could question the first one. Poisoner had become curse-bearer. Curse-bearer had become thief of royal bond. Saevra was worse. The priestess knew where to aim the fear. "A stolen mate bond is treason against the crown," Saevra declared from outside. "If the servant has rooted her name into royal blood, she must be severed before the bond kills him." Riven's hand went to the sword at his hip. Asterin caught the movement. "No." His eyes flashed. "No? If you cut your way out now, they will say I made you defend me. They already say it. Then do not help them sharpen the blade." The buried bond beat once. The red apple in Asterin's hand answered. The silver apple followed. 3 heartbeats moved through the orchard, one under the roots, one in her palm, one beneath Riven's armor. The rhythm was uneven, broken into pieces. Asterin looked down at the fruits. "Why are there 2 apples?" Riven followed her gaze. One for what was taken. And the silver one? The orchard answered by opening the silver apple wider. Its white seed glowed inside folded flesh. Asterin saw another memory, not a whole vision, only a flash of soil, blood, and women's hands pressing seeds into graves. Not to grow death, to grow proof. Proof that could not be burned, bribed, or ordered silent. She whispered, "One for what remembers." Riven heard. So did the orchard. The white blossoms at her feet turned toward her like small moons. The branches above shifted, opening a narrow view through the wall. Outside, the court stood in a broken crescent around the gate. Selva had one hand pressed dramatically to her breast, her stained glove now hidden beneath a fold of silk. Saevra stood beside her with the root seed pendant blazing black. Riven stepped into the opening. "I am not bound." His voice carried through the orchard. The court froze. Selva's expression flickered, then smoothed. "Majesty, thank the moon." Saevra bowed her head. "Then step away from the servant and leave the fruit where it lies." Riven did not move. That was enough. A murmur passed through the nobles. Asterin saw the trap close. If he stayed near her, they would call it influence. If he obeyed and left her beside the buried bond, Saevra would sever whatever had woken before anyone could ask why Asterin's name had been there in the first place. The orchard roots tightened around the nest of thorns, protecting the bond, or protecting her from it. Saevra lifted her pendant. By death, orchard law, the accused must be brought before witness with the fruit in hand. Let the court see whether the bond follows her or the king. Asterin went cold. Riven turned sharply. "No." Saevra's eyes gleamed. "If she is innocent, Majesty, the bond will not answer her before the court." Selva lowered her gaze, but not before Asterin saw satisfaction there. This was what they wanted. Not merely to kill her in the orchard, but to expose her before every noble and make Riven's pain look like her crime. The branches began to part. Not because Saevra commanded them, because the orchard allowed witness. Asterin looked at the buried bond, still wrapped around her name, then at Riven. "If I refuse, they will say guilt kept me hidden. If you go, they may condemn you. They already did before the gate opened." He said nothing. The silence hurt because it held agreement. Asterin bent and reached toward the thorn nest. Riven caught her wrist before she touched it. His grip was firm, warm, careful around the cuts in her palm. The contact sent a shock through both apples. The red one beat hard enough to make him inhale sharply. He released her at once. Not because he wanted to, because the court was watching. Asterin understood the restraint, and somehow it steadied her more than protection would have. She lifted the red apple in one hand and the silver in the other. The buried bond dimmed beneath the roots. The path opened to the gate. As Asterin stepped out of the deepest row beside the Alpha King, the black trees bowed behind her, and every silver-named apple in the overturned basket rolled after her through the snow. Saevra stared at them. For the first time, her voice shook. "Orchard blood," she whispered. The court heard. Selva smiled like a woman watching a noose tighten, and the red apple in Asterin's hand began beating louder than Riven's heart. The court saw Asterin return with the apples following her. That was the first thing no one could explain away. The silver-named fruit rolled through the snow behind her, in a slow, silent line, each one glowing faintly, where her blood had woken a buried name beneath its skin. They did not roll toward the basket. They did not roll toward the priestess. They followed the cursed kitchen girl, as if the death orchard had decided she was safer than the law. Asterin stepped through the broken gate, with the red apple in one hand and the silver apple in the other. Riven walked beside her. Not ahead, not behind, beside. That alone was enough to turn fear into accusation. Lady Selva Morn was the first to speak. "Majesty, step away from her." Riven's expression hardened. "Careful." Selva's lashes lowered, perfect and wounded. "I am trying to save you." "No," Asterin said quietly. "You are trying to decide what everyone sees before they look too closely." Selva's face stilled. The court heard the challenge. Servants did not accuse Luna candidates. Kitchen girls did not stand in orchard blood beneath the eyes of nobles and speak as if truth had given them height. Saevra Dusk lifted the root seed pendant. Its black center pulsed once, and several silver apples behind Asterin dimmed. "There will be no shouting over sacred witness," the priestess declared. If the fruit carries the king's stolen bond, the court must know whether it answers him by nature or her by corruption. The word corruption passed easily through the nobles. It had always been easy to give an ugly name to a poor girl's power. Riven turned toward Saevra. "You will not touch her." "I do not need to touch her." Saevra pointed to the old stone table beside the orchard gate, where punishment tools were laid during harvest trials. "Place both fruits there. If the red apple beats for you alone, Majesty, we will contain it safely. If it beats for the servant, then she has rooted herself into royal blood." Asterin looked at the stone table. Its surface was stained with black rings where death apples had rotted through winter offerings. A narrow silver blade lay across it. Not a kitchen knife, not a harvest tool, a severing knife. She understood. This was never meant to prove innocence. It was meant to prepare the next punishment. Riven saw it too. His voice dropped. "No." Saevra's eyes did not move from Asterin. "If she refuses, the court must assume the bond follows her." Selvra added softly, "And if you refuse for Her Majesty, they will assume the same." Asterin felt the trap close around them both. Riven could burn the court open. She could see it in him. His wolf was close, furious beneath his skin, ready to tear through priestess, noble, witness, and law. But if he did, Selvra would win anyway. The story would become simple. Cursed servant enters orchard, king follows, king returns, changed. Asterin walked to the stone table before Riven could stop her. His hand moved once, then closed into a fist at his side. She noticed the restraint. The court noticed the fist. Selvra noticed both and smiled. Asterin placed the silver apple on the stone first. It opened like a flower. Inside, the white seed glowed brighter than moonlight. The silver-named apples behind her rolled closer, forming a half-circle at her feet. Each fruit turned so its name faced the court. Merith Vale, Usolde Thorn, Leora Fen, Zeren Ashwell, dozens more. The nobles began to murmur. Some knew the names. Some had inherited the lies attached to them. Saevra struck the table with her pendant. The red fruit. Asterin placed the red apple beside the silver one. The effect was immediate. Riven staggered. The red fruit beat so loudly the sound passed through the courtyard like a war drum under water. Every wolf lowered its head, not in submission, but in pain. Then the red apple rolled. Not toward Asterin, toward Riven. A breath of relief moved through the court. Selvra seized it. "There, it belongs to him. Take it from the table and let the priestess seal it." But before Saevra could reach for it, the silver apple pulsed. The red fruit stopped. Slowly, impossibly, it rolled back to the center of the stone table, between Riven and Asterin. The court fell silent again. Saevra's face became unreadable, cut her palm. Riven stepped forward. "No." Asterin looked at him once, not pleading, warning. If he protected her now, they would use it against them. She picked up the severing knife herself. The handle was cold, heavier than it looked. She dragged the blade across her already wounded palm, and pain went white behind her eyes. Blood fell onto the stone table. The silver apple drank it. The red apple answered. A vine burst from between them, pale as bone and bright with silver veins. It wrapped around the severing knife first, crushing the blade into powder. Then it crawled across the table, not toward Riven's hand, but toward Asterin's wrist. Selvra whispered, "Witch." The word moved through the court faster than any proof. Saevra's expression sharpened with triumph. Orchard corruption confirmed. "No," Asterin said. She did not know how she knew. She only knew the vine did not feel like corruption. It felt like a hand reaching out of a grave and finding living blood at last. The vine wrapped her wrist. It did not bind. It bloomed. Small white flowers opened around her skin, and in each petal a woman's name shone for one heartbeat before fading. The red apple beat once more. Riven pressed a hand to his chest, but this time he did not bend. He stared at Asterin's wrist, as if something there had answered a question his wolf had carried for years. Saevra lifted the root seed pendant high. By moon law, the servant is exposed as an orchard witch carrier. She must be severed before the buried bond completes. The court recoiled. Asterin looked at the white blossoms on her wrist. Orchard witch. The word should have sounded like a curse. Instead, every black tree behind the gate bowed. The stone beneath the courtyard cracked. From the death orchard, One grave opened, then another, and from beneath the roots, the falsely rejected women began to rise. The dead did not rise like monsters. They rose like witnesses. First came hands made of pale root and moonlit bone, pushing through the split earth beneath the death orchard. Then faces formed out of bark, ash, and winter mist. Women stepped from the graves with soil in their hair and silver blossoms growing where names had been scraped from stone. Some wore ruined bridal cloaks, some wore servant gray, some wore noble silks blackened by years beneath the roots. None of them looked at the court first. They looked at Asterin. The white flowers around her wrist opened wider, each petal burning with a name before it vanished into silver dust. Pain climbed her arm, not sharp now, but deep, as if the orchard had placed too many memories beneath her skin and expected her bones to hold them all. She swayed. Riven stepped closer. The court held its breath. So did he. His hand lifted, stopped, and lowered again before touching her. The restraint was visible enough to hurt. He wanted to steady her. He would not let them turn that into proof against her. Asterin saw the choice and hated that she was grateful. Saevra Dusk raised the root seed pendant, back into the ground. The command cracked through the orchard. The dark seed inside the moonstone spun violently, throwing black light across the opened graves. Several of the risen women flickered, their root bodies bending as if an unseen chain had pulled at their throats. Asterin felt the pull, too. It struck through her wrist flowers and dragged at her blood. She gasped. The silver apple on the stone table flared. The red apple beat once. Riven's wolf surged behind his eyes. "Stop." Saevra did not look at him. "They are not souls, Majesty. They are orchard echoes given shape by forbidden blood." One of the risen women turned her head. Her face was half bark, half memory. A deep cut crossed her throat where no wound should remain after death. When she spoke, her voice came through the black trees. "Echoes do not remember names." The silver-named apples at Asterin's feet rolled forward. One stopped before the woman. Marith Vale. The court shifted. Lord Vale, old and bent beside the eastern pillar, made a strangled sound. The woman turned her root-pale eyes toward him. "You called me mad when your son rejected me." The apple split open. Inside, the court saw a younger Lord Vale signing a witness paper while Marith was dragged toward the orchard. She had not raved. She had not cursed the moon. She had begged for her wolf to be allowed to answer before rejection became law. The fruit collapsed into silver ash. Lord Vale fell to his knees. Another risen woman stepped forward. Then another. Each silver apple gave a name. Each name gave proof. The death orchard had not preserved grief because it hungered for sorrow. It had preserved evidence no court would keep. Asterin understood with a force that nearly broke her. This was what orchard witch blood did. It did not summon the dead for vengeance. It grew proof from buried betrayal. Saevra saw the understanding in her face and struck before she could speak it. "Enough," the priestess said. "The girl is not witness. She is the root that woke them. If she remains alive, every rejected grave in Blackthorn will open. Every old alliance will bleed. Every noble house will be dragged before orchard ghosts." "Then perhaps," Riven said, voice cold, "they should have buried fewer women." The words stunned the court. Asterin looked at him. For one breath, she forgot the pain in her wrist. Selva recovered first. "Majesty, compassion is admirable, but this servant's blood is tied to your stolen bond. Every word she speaks may be shaping what you feel." Riven turned toward her slowly. "My grief is not her invention." Selva's smile did not break. "Then prove it. Step away from her." The court waited. Asterin's chest tightened. There it was again, a clean command with a dirty blade under it. If Riven stepped away, Saevra would sever her. If he refused, they would call it influence. Riven looked at Asterin. This time, he did not ask permission with words. He asked with stillness. Asterin answered by turning away from him and facing the risen women herself. "I did not call you to make him choose me," she said. The orchard quieted. "I do not know what I am. I do not know why my name was wrapped around his bond. I only know you were buried with lies, and I will not send you back unnamed." The flowers on her wrist burned white. The risen women bowed their heads. Not to a queen, not to a witch crowned in power, to the first living girl who had refused to look away. Saevra's pendant cracked faintly. A thread of black light leaked from the moonstone into her palm. She closed her fist around it too quickly, but Asterin saw. So did Riven. The orchard saw more. A thin root slid from beneath the stone table toward Selvra's gown. Selvra stepped back. Too late. The root caught the edge of her hidden glove and pulled. White lace tore. The court saw the black stain on her fingertip. Death apple resin. Asterin's breath caught. Selvra froze. The silver apple opened, and its seed turned toward the stained glove like an eye. Riven's voice dropped. You marked the goblet. Selvra's face went pala, then proud. I protected the throne from what the priestess warned us would come. Saevra's gaze snapped to her. Too sharp. Too late. The court heard enough. The accusation that had sent Asterin into the orchard began to collapse in the snow between them. But Saevra did not panic. She lifted the cracked pendant higher, and the root seed inside it split open. A black pulse struck the death orchard. Every risen woman convulsed. The red apple slammed against the stone table, as if an invisible hand had tried to crush it. Riven doubled over, one hand at his chest. Asterin screamed as the flowers around her wrist turned black at their edges. Saevra's voice rang over the chaos. If the orchard wants witness, then let it witness the old sentence. The ground beneath Asterin opened. Roots wrapped around her ankles, but this time they were not gentle. Riven surged toward her. The court shouted. The risen women reached for Asterin as the blackened roots dragged her backward through the broken gate, toward the white tree and the open grave beneath it. Saevra's eyes blazed with the dark seed's light. Return the air to the soil, she commanded, and the death orchard began to pull Asterin under. The earth closed over Asterin before Riven reached her. Snow, roots, and black soil swallowed the sound of the court. For one breath, she saw the broken gate above her, the white tree bending like a pale hand, Riven's face stripped of command as he lunged toward the hole. Then darkness took her. The roots dragged her down fast, but they did not crush her. That made the terror worse. Something under the orchard wanted her alive, wanted her aware, wanted her to understand what it was returning her to. Cold soil filled her mouth. She tried to scream and swallowed earth. Then the silver apple in her left hand opened. Light burst through the dark. Asterin fell into a hollow beneath the roots and landed on frozen ground covered in white blossoms. Not a grave, not exactly. A chamber grown from bone-pale roots, black stones, and thousands of buried names carved into wood that had never seen the sun. Women stood around her. The falsely rejected, the hidden, the silenced. Their root-formed faces watched her without hatred. That frightened her more than rage would have. Rage she could understand. She had carried enough of it in silence. But this was expectation. The red apple beat in her right hand. Above, muffled through roots, Riven roared her name. The sound shook the chamber. Asterin pushed herself up, choking on soil. I cannot hold this. A woman stepped from the others. She looked more alive than the rest, though her body was woven of bark and moonlit ash. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves over a torn kitchen-gray dress. Around her wrist bloomed the same white flowers now blackening on Asterin's skin. Asterin knew her face. Not from memory. From blood. Asterin Hale, the woman said. First orchard witness. Your mother's mother's mother. And the first they buried when proof became inconvenient. Asterin shook her head. I am only a servant. You were made one. The words entered her like a blade turned sideways. Elira lifted a root-pale hand toward the red apple. That bond was never buried because it belonged to a king. It was buried because it reached beyond approved blood. His wolf would have found the line they tried to erase. My line. The witness line. Above, Saevra's voice thundered through the roots. Hold her down. The chamber trembled. Black veins spread through the white blossoms as the root seed forced its command deeper. Several dead women flickered, their names dimming. Asterin clutched both apples. What does she want? Elira's expression hardened, to keep the orchard useful. Images flared across the root walls. Saevra kneeling over the first hidden grave, feeding the orchard stolen bonds, rejected vows, severed names. The death orchard had once grown proof from betrayal. Saevra had turned it into a punishment grove, using the root seed to choke witness into obedience. Women were not buried there because the orchard demanded them. They were buried there so the orchard would never testify for them. Asterin's hands shook. The red apple beat again, and through it she felt Riven above, fighting roots, calling orders, refusing every guard who tried to drag him back. His pain was not only fear for her, it was recognition of every lie his crown had inherited. Elira touched Asterin's wrist. The blackened flowers flared white. "You can return everything at once," Elira said. "Every bond, every rejection, every name. The orchard will tear through the court and feed truth to the roots." Asterin heard the temptation. One breath, and the people above who had laughed at her would understand what it felt like to be dragged beneath law. One breath, and no one would ever call her rot fingers again. She looked at the red apple. And Riven? The bond would return through blood and pain. He would survive, changed. Asterin closed her eyes. There it was. Power shaped like justice, but sharpened enough to become another punishment. "No," she whispered. The dead women stirred. Asterin opened her eyes. "I will not make the orchard do to them what they did to you." Elira watched her for a long moment. Then she smiled, not gently, but proudly. "Then grow proof." Asterin pressed the silver apple to the frozen ground. Above the orchard, the court saw the earth crack. White blossoms erupted through the snow, spreading in rings from the hole where Asterin had vanished. Each blossom opened with a name inside it. Each name lifted an image into the air, Selvra marking the goblet with death apple resin. Lord Morn whispering that a cursed servant would be easier to accuse than a noble daughter. Saevra lowering Riven's mate bond beneath the orchard. Saevra feeding the root seed with rejected women's names to keep the grove obedient. The court tried to look away. The blossoms turned toward them. Witness does not ask permission. Riven saw Selvra's image first. He turned. Selvra stepped back, her stained glove clutched against her chest. "I acted to protect the crown." "You acted to take it," Riven said. Saevra lifted the cracked pendant and screamed an old command. The root seed split fully. Black light poured from it, striking the ground where Asterin had fallen. The death orchard convulsed. The risen women bent. The white blossoms shuddered, nearly crushed under the wave of Saevra's will. Then the red apple in Asterin's hand beat once beneath the earth. Riven heard it. He placed his hand flat against his breastplate, then against the white tree. "I will not reclaim what was stolen by letting her be buried for it," he said. The orchard stilled. His voice cut through court, root, and grave. "If the bond is mine, it returns only by her witness. If it is not mine to take, then let it live free of my crown." The red apple split open. Beneath the earth, silver red light rushed up Asterin's arms, not burning, not binding, but recognizing. The roots around her changed from black to white. The buried names along the chamber walls lit one by one until the darkness became a sky of women the kingdom had tried to erase. Elira stepped back. "He chose without claiming," she said. "Now answer without kneeling." Asterin rose. The earth above her opened. She emerged from the death orchard covered in soil, blood, and white blossoms, both apples fused into one silver-red fruit beating in her hands. Around her, the risen women stood in full view of the court. Saevra staggered as the root seed pendant cracked to dust. The black trees turned away from the priestess. Then every death apple in the orchard opened at once, and every buried betrayal began speaking its owner's name. The death orchard spoke in voices the court had spent generations refusing to hear. Every black apple opened on its branch, silver-red light spilling from split skins. Names rose through the winter air like sparks from a funeral fire. Merith Vale, Isolde Thorn, Leora Fenn, Saren Ashwell, Elira Hale, dozens more. Noble daughters, servant girls, rejected Lunas. Women accused of madness, treason, barrenness, curse work, and ambition, when their only crime had been standing in the way of treaties men wanted clean. The court did not scream at first. It listened. That was the orchard's first victory. Asterin stood beneath the white tree, covered in soil and blood, with the fused silver-red apple beating in both hands. Its rhythm no longer struck Riven like a wound. It answered him, yes, but it also answered her, not as possession, not as claim. As proof that something stolen could return without becoming another chain, Riven stood before the court with one hand still against the white bark. His wolf had risen behind his eyes, close enough that his shadow on the snow looked larger than a man's. Yet he did not step toward Asterin. He did not reach for the fruit. He did not call it his. Saevra Dusk fell to her knees where the root seed pendant had turned to ash against her chest. Without the seed, she looked suddenly mortal, not less dangerous, only smaller. A priestess without the orchard's silence around her. "This will break the kingdom," she said. Asterin turned toward her. "No, it will break what the kingdom hid under its roots." Saevra's mouth tightened. "You think names are enough?" "No." Asterin looked at the risen women standing among the trees. "But names are where burial ends." The silver-named apples rolled forward, one by one, gathering at the broken gate. Each fruit opened and cast its memory across the courtyard. Lords who signed false rejections. Fathers who erased daughters to preserve alliances. Priestesses who called murder containment. Women dragged beneath the orchard, while wolves howled against locked doors. The nobles tried to back away. The wolves did not let them. Riven's voice moved through the court like iron drawn from fire. "No one leaves." Selva Morn had retreated near the western arch, her ruined glove hidden behind her skirt, though the entire court had already seen the resin stain. When Riven's guards closed around her, she lifted her chin, as if pride could still dress itself as innocence. "I did what any future Luna must do," she said. "I protected the throne from forbidden blood." Asterin looked at her. "You marked a goblet and sent a kitchen girl to die." Selvra's eyes flashed. "Because the orchard chose you before anyone else could stop it." The admission settled over the snow. Riven turned fully toward her. Selvra seemed to realize too late what she had confessed. Her face paled, then hardened into the last defense of the guilty, contempt. "She is an oath-bound servant," Selvra said. "Her blood was buried for a reason." The fused apple beat once in Asterin's hands. From the orchard floor, Asterin Hale stepped forward. Her root-woven body glowed with white blossoms, her eyes fixed not on Selvra, but on the court that had made such words possible. "The witness line was buried, because proof cannot be commanded," she said. Riven looked at Asterin then, not as a king looking at a servant, not as a man looking at a woman who might carry his lost bond, as someone finally seeing the shape of the wound beneath her life. "Oath-bound service ends tonight," he said. The court stirred. Saevra lifted her head. "Majesty." He did not look at her. "The death orchard rite ends tonight. Every accusation tied to orchard law will be reopened before living witness. Every grave beneath these trees will be named. Every house that profited from false rejection will answer by crown, wolf, and blood debt." Asterin's hands trembled around the apple. For years, she had wanted only small freedoms: a dry blanket, a meal not taken as punishment, a day without someone flinching from her touch. Now the king was breaking an old law with her name still fresh in the dirt, and some frightened part of her did not know how to stand beneath so much change. Riven saw the tremor. His hand moved, then stopped. The space between them remained unclaimed. That mattered more than any vow he could have spoken too soon. Saevra laughed softly, broken but not defeated. "You will regret mercy. Orchard witch blood does not serve crowns." Asterin answered before Riven could. "No, it serves truth." She walked to the stone table where the severing knife had been crushed to dust. The fused apple pulsed warmer in her hands. She placed it on the table. The fruit opened. Inside was not a seed now, but a small silver-red flame shaped like a heartbeat. Riven inhaled sharply. Asterin felt the pull too, a thread reaching from the flame to him, then to her, then into the orchard's roots, where all the falsely buried names waited. The bond was alive, the bond remembered, but it did not leap into either of them. It waited, like a choice. Asterin looked at Riven. "If this is yours, take it only when you can tell whether you want the bond or the woman standing beside it." The court froze at her boldness. Riven's face changed. Pain first, then respect. "I know the difference," he said quietly. "Not yet," she answered. His jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. "Good." She needed a king who could bear truth before he asked for trust. Riven bowed his head once. "Then I will wait until you believe me." The red-silver flame steadied. The orchard sighed. All around them, the risen women began to fade, not vanish, not be forced back, but loosen from root and grief. As each name was spoken aloud by the court scribes under Riven's command, A tree shed black bark and revealed pale wood beneath. The death orchard did not become beautiful, not yet. But dawn touched its branches without being swallowed. Asterin Hale lingered longest. She came to Asterin and placed a root-pale hand over her bloodied wrist. The white flowers there softened into silver scars, shaped like tiny petals. "Last witness," Elira said. "First, return." Asterin's throat tightened. "I do not know how to be either." "Then begin by not kneeling." Elira faded into a shower of white blossoms. When the sun broke over Blackthorn Keep, Seevra was taken in chains to the moon crypt she had used to hide the root seed. Selvra was held for witness judgment, her stained glove sealed beside the blackened goblet. Lords who had laughed at Asterin lowered their eyes when she passed, not out of kindness, but because their wolves watched from every shadow. The kitchen doors stood open when she returned. No one called her rot fingers. No one called her cursed. That silence was not forgiveness. It was only the first empty space where cruelty had lived. Riven found her at the threshold, still wearing soil on his boots from the orchard. "You are free of the kitchens," he said. Asterin looked past him toward the courtyard, where the white tree could be seen beyond the broken gate. "Freedom is not the same as knowing where to go." "No," he said. "It is only the first road." She studied him, the feared Alpha King, the wounded man, the ruler whose bond had been stolen and returned to a table between them because she had refused to become another burial. "And if I choose a road away from Blackthorn?" she asked. His eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. "Then no wolf of mine will hunt you. And if I stay? Then no law of mine will own you." The answer settled between them, quiet and dangerous, and almost tender. Asterin looked down at her scarred wrist. The petal marks glowed faintly, not like chains, but like roots waiting for rain. Beyond the orchard gate, the fused apple beat once on the stone table, patient as a heart that had learned not to force itself back into anyone's chest. She did not take Riven's hand. Not yet. But she walked beside him into the dawn, past the broken gate, past the court that had watched her condemned, past the trees that were no longer only death. Behind her, the first living apple of the orchard turned silver on its branch. And this time, no one dared bury what it remembered.